Hey everybody, it's our favorite West Virginia now in space here, and let's talk about She-Hulk Attorney at Law, because that show just finished, and, where do I begin? Okay, first of all, it's not the worst show ever. I mean, I've seen worse in my day, but it does definitely suffer. It's not good. And the worst part is, I think the writers think they are, breaking some new ground when they just really aren't. Except maybe, well, let's just back off a bit. Now, to be fair, I am not terribly familiar with She-Hulk as a character. I know little bits about her, but to be fair, she was never one of my favorites or anything, so this isn't coming as some expert of She-Hulk knowledge coming down to lay some facts down on the peasants. It's just a person who likes good TV shows. And it just doesn't. Let's back up for a second. First of all, well, how would I begin? I think the best place to begin is with She-Hulk herself. Is that she's just not a very good character. She's not necessarily a bad person in any real way. It's not like I'm saying, oh, she's actually evil. No, it's just, she's uninteresting. She's not an enjoyable character to watch. She occasionally bounces from this. In episode 1, she was very snotty and very, aggressive in a way. That was once again, she had the audacity to say her life was harder than Hulk's, which is, oh, lady. But then after that, after, episode 1, and, going from 2 onwards, she would occasionally have moments that would come close to that. But then, it's just but then most of the time she spends season 1 of the show just being this weak, timid person who just anyone can walk all over her and doesn't really stand up for herself, which is, I guess they were trying to do it as a character arc, but it did not come off as that. It just came off as this weak and timid person who would occasionally act in a kind of weird way. And it doesn't add up because this isn't like a character with conflicting sides to them. This isn't like a character, it isn't like some clever play on character having a dual nature. No, it's just the writers writing her inconsistently. And the problem is, inconsistently, and both are not terribly interesting. Granted, the one that stands up for herself is usually a bit more interesting, but not by much. And she happens by far most of the time in the show is this weak, timid person who lets anyone walk all over her. And pro tip, that's not generally the character you want to have be your main character. As a rule of storytelling, or not a rule, but a general guideline, you want your main character to be active, to be proactive in the story, or at the very least doing stuff, and I'll get to that later. But she really doesn't. She just kind of exists, and things happen to her, but she doesn't really respond to them. She loses her job, but then gets a new job because someone called her. She does this or that because someone tells her to. She doesn't really do things of her own volition a lot of the time. It is not terribly interesting character for it. And her mild reactions to a lot of things, except in these brief moments, is kind of weird. She finds, in episode 4, I think it was, she finds this one guy that she actually likes, but it turns out the guy doesn't like her as She-Hulk, and they'll play this plot point 2 or 3 times, I think. But, it then kind of works out for her later, but it's she's oh, I don't like you. Basically, it's I don't like you as a Jen. And she just kind of shakes it off, huh? I feel like that should inspire a bit more of an emotional reaction. The next time this happens, because this happens 2 times in the show, except the second time he was actually an actor for Intelligentsia. Don't worry, we'll get there. But, and she does respond a bit better by wasting the entire episode to what amounts to a breakup and a catch-up on Neil LeBlanc's. And it wasn't a very good one either. But anyway, that's kind of the main problem with the main character, is that she does, and we'll come back to her not doing anything until the next part of this video, but let's move on. Now, moving on to the side characters, it kind of comes into a problem when most characters in the story just kind of don't have much personality. Her 2, I don't want to say sidekicks, but side pieces? I don't know. But, whether you call them supporting cast, I don't know what you call it, but her supporting cast mainly contributes to 2 characters. One is kind of her best friend kind of lady who helps her out, sometimes in law cases and such, and Pug, who I'm not entirely sure what he does at the thing exactly. I'm not actually sure. I forgot. But the point is they kind of help her out in missions with air quotes. But they kind of do their own thing, but they don't have much personality. In any other show, they'd probably be like tertiary and fourth tier characters that simply exist to exist, and they wouldn't be focused on much unless some plotline specifically drums them up out of the void. Like they're lower on the tier ranking than the standard love interest. And then we get onto like her boss, who just kind of exists in some episodes and then kind of unexists. Like seriously, he like disappears halfway through the show. Like what's up with that? Well, I guess he kind of showed up, but like he just kind of existed for a guy I thought was going to be more important. And then we get on to what I can best describe as cameo characters. See Hulk, Wong, and Daredevil, who just show up for about 2 or 3 episodes, actually do something with the plot, and then just kind of phase out. Banner is like kind of like the main mentor for episode 1 when he's getting bullied, and a little bit in episode 2, but then he flies off on a spaceship, literally. Wong shows up in episode 3 and 4 and then had a cameo at the end. And he, ironically enough, does more, but I'll explain that later. And Daredevil shows up for episode 8 to what amounts to one of his storylines, and S.H.I.E.L.D. just kind of tag along. And then he shows up again episode 9 as like their thing now, I guess. I don't know. This feels wrong. Wrong, can you stop this? But, and then you get, like, the antagonist. Now, I'm gonna save my hands on the plot of them for the next section. But overall, they just don't really stick. Abomination is kind of an antagonist, I say, but then he really doesn't act like it for most of the story. But then he kind of is revealed to be at the end, but then we don't really understand what his involvement was in the whole plot, but we'll get to that later. And Titania just existed at the end of episode 1 and occasionally shows up to cause her trouble. And I'm still confused as to why Titania isn't in jail for the courtroom incident. Or, you know, when she fought her in the wedding. Why is she not in jail? Can they just not keep her in jail? Like, I swear, Arkham Asylum has a better ability to keep its criminals in line than whatever S.H.I.E.L.D. is saying this chick. And then there's Intelligentsia and its whole little conglomerate. It just does not stick, man. Like, listen, I love the concept of the shadowy organization that's out to get the heroes, because that's always fun. At least if you play it right, see, like tons of villains have that. It's like basically Hydra's whole stick half the time, when it's just up in your face. But, like, it just doesn't here, because they're supposed, instead of being this shadowy organization that puppets things behind the strings, there are a bunch of trolls on the internet. S.H.I.E.L.D. basically fights Reddit, and somehow mostly loses, honestly. She basically has to rely on plot hacks to get her out of it, which is not a good look when you basically lose to Reddit. That's just not good, man. But, and I'll save most of my talk for Intelligent to the plot section, but just in the broad strokes, it just does not hit. The main supporting cast don't have much personality. The side cameo characters, I take up the stage from She-Hulk, but then disappear before you can really enjoy them too much. And the villains just do not hit or have a terribly good screen presence. Like, seriously, I'd rather have Skeletor be the bad guy for an episode. In fact, that sounds way more fun. Just have Skeletor show up out of nowhere and be like, nah, She-Hulk, I need you for law reasons. He-Man has stolen my cat, or something like that. I mean, geez, that would have been a fun episode. But anyway, let's move on to the next section. And here we get to the big kahunas. The thing I've been kind of hyping you up for these past 8 minutes or so is the plot of the show, which doesn't really exist. Like, don't worry, there is a plot. I could tell you the events of the story, and if I were to explain them to you in a written down fashion, it would probably be like, okay, that sounds like a story, but it's not presented like that in the show. Like, our main antagonist is Intelligentsia, which apparently is an actual thing from the comics, but looks way cooler there. But like I said in the previous section, Intelligentsia is basically a group of people who think that She-Hulk doesn't deserve her powers, or they want her powers, or they think they stole them. It's really confusing. I think they're all just excuses because they're sexist, I guess. I mean, they come off as kind of sexist, but also doesn't really come off as the main motivation. I don't get it. And, like, a lot of things just don't make sense, and they're basically just an amalgamation of the worst parts of Reddit, 4chan, internet culture in general. And it's just, like, not a very good villain. Like, they're able to pull off some stuff that's rather impressive at points, like hiring people to seduce She-Hulk and get her blood, being able to hack a lot of stuff for some reason, and doing all these other things, but yet they just don't come off as intimidating. It feels more like the characters are too stupid to stop them. And that's why I get it, is that She-Hulk does not contribute to the plot of the show. Yes, the bad guys do things to her. Things happen around her, but she doesn't really directly affect them. Episode 4, I think it is the best example, where this sideshow magician is using real magic and sending people to bad places across the multiverse, and Wong is like, you can't do that, and tries to, like, get him to stop, but it's like a whole legal battle, and then the guy does it and sends some demons through, and then, like, Wong has to send a portal back, and though I gave you a horribly condensed version of the episode, the entire plot of the episode literally would have panned out the same if She-Hulk didn't exist. I'm sorry, but when you have only 9 episodes in a serialized show, and the 4th episode, midway through the show, could have literally happened the same if the main character just ceased to exist, is not a good look. Like, it legitimately just makes her feel pointless, and a lot of episodes aren't much better. She's usually just being told what to do by somebody and never really doing anything. Like, it feels kind of like almost like a video game protagonist, like in one of those like a Fallout style video game where you're told to go here and told to go this, but unlike in a video game where you A, probably have some choices to make along the way, or B, some fun gameplay to mix it up, it just doesn't exist here. She's just like, oh, okay, let's go do that, and then like T-poses over somewhere else, and it's just like, Like, the plot just isn't coherent either. We really don't learn about Intelligentsia until almost like the halfway mark of this, I think episode 5 or 6. And though we get hints of them earlier on, it does kind of feel a bit out of nowhere. And once again, the villains don't really hit. And it just doesn't add up. But then there's the last episode, which took everything from a mediocre show and kind of ruined it in a lot of ways. That, like, the last episode was a complete and utter mess. Literally showing the most classic example of, like, earlier in the season, not in the 9th episode, the 2 side characters to help She-Hulk, like I mentioned, that chick and Pug, are the ones to go get her super suit. Because She-Hulk doesn't get her own super suit, someone else has to do it for her, not because she's busy, but because the writers don't want to have her do anything, I guess. That she kind of interacts with him later, but she's not the one to initiate this whole deal and setup, when She-Hulk isn't really doing anything either. But, like, in episode 9, they also are the ones who infiltrate Reddit, they infiltrate Reddit, and, like, then She-Hulk, instead of these two, which use at least use some form of deception by getting, like, a video to get into Intelligentsia cleverly in this whole system, She-Hulk literally just walks into it, and and then, like, it just kind of devolves, and, like, I know the whole joke is that, oh, but look, that would have been a bad way to end the episode, wouldn't have, but acknowledging it's bad, you still wrote it. You still wrote that in a way that presumably you thought made sense at one point. And it gets worse when you realize that she has been fourth wall breaking the entire show, but it's mostly been kept the same levels. And I'm generally not a fan of fourth wall breaking. A few times it's fun. Garfield's the best example, but I'm not a big fan of it. But when you have characters like She-Hulk, who in this universe can literally just go between shows and mess with plots, it just creates so many questions. And, like, why? I mean, at least she's doing something, but it's not even like, it just doesn't hit, man. Doesn't hit. And then, like, the plot that she makes later with the help of Kevin, a robot, doesn't make any more sense. Like, who found out about Intelligentsia? How did all this happen? Like, I still have questions. Why Daredevil's here? How did he know about what was going on? Like, it doesn't help. And I have one small, real nitpick here, is that I do have to seriously wonder on a small level, just this one thing. Him taking the blood of S.H.I.E.L.D. to get powers makes total sense, S.H.I.E.L.D. The writers. I'm sorry, but that makes perfect sense. Yeah, it's a bit of a cliche, but the Hulk set that up in episode 1, that your blood could be used to, like, give people powers who could use the things. That was set up on episode 1. Like, that's like the one thing from the pilot that really mattered. Except the getting powers part, really. Like, yeah, that kind of hit. It's just bizarre. But anyway, let's move on to the last and final section. This is just some random bits for my closing, and let's just speed through this. Well, to deal with some minor points, yeah, the CGI is kind of bad. Like, it's not so bad at some points, but She-Hulk especially got hit with the "what on earth am I looking at" button. Like, realistically, you should have just gotten some muscular chick to just paint her green and just have her play She-Hulk for the She-Hulk sections, because it would have looked a ton better, because this CGI does not work. I'm sorry. I don't know why, because Hulk, Abomination, like all these other things look fine, but this just doesn't, man, and I don't know why. It just hits the uncanny valley so hard. It's worse earlier on, but it never goes away. Like, seriously, just paint some girl green like in the original Hulk live-action TV show, except, like I said, a chick this time. Other random bits. A lot of people say this is super sexist against men, and I don't really want to say that. I mean, it's clear to me the writers have something against men, but in show, it's not really that. It's more in the show that everyone's kind of a douche. Like, everyone's kind of a douche or a jerk or some kind of variation of. Like, the characters that couldn't be considered that are, like, countable on one hand. So, it's just kind of weird. It's aside from the show not being terribly well written overall. And it's just like, I don't understand. Another minor point is, how did this show turn out so bad when Moon Knight was so good? And also another question, how does She-Hulk get 9 episodes but Moon Knight only gets 6? This doesn't feel fair. I feel cheated. I could have had 3 more episodes of Moon Knight for this. But, sorry, I really like Moon Knight. But, Moon Knight's also a really good show. You should watch that. Way better show. Way better use of your time. But, to close out my thoughts on all of it, was She-Hulk a good show? No, it was a bad show. Not even a bad show, but was it an awful show? Was it offensive? Not really. It's just kind of suck. Like, it's not, like, it doesn't suck in the mediocre way. It sucks in the sense of, like, you ever read a fan fiction that was, like, bad? Okay, it was bad, but it wasn't, like, gross or offensive in any real way. It was just kind of suck. The writing wasn't terribly good. The story didn't hit very hard. And it just wasn't terribly good. Like, didn't get the characters quite right, but not, like, in a super offensive way. It was just not very well written. That's kind of what this entire show feels like. One mildly okay fanfiction. Or, like, mildly meh fanfiction, I think. Like, I equated the show of She-Hulk to the first draft of a show. Like, I feel like if the show, like, this is, like, the first draft of a She-Hulk TV show, and, like, if it was given a few more runs in the oven, I don't know, maybe if you cut down the episodes some or forced to condense the plot a little bit, maybe if you did some other things like that, maybe you got some better writers on board, maybe you just thought about the plot a bit more, I think it would have done better. I think it would have worked a whole lot better as a show. But as it stands, I really think they dropped the ball with She-Hulk. I think She-Hulk was a show that could have been really good, but it just never really hit for me. It was not a good lore show, wasn't a good superhero show, wasn't a good She-Hulk show, but it was never strictly awful. I think to some extent the internet overhyped how bad it was, but then other times it's completely different. Like, it got it completely spot on. I think overall She-Hulk will go down as known as a bad show, but nothing memorable. It'll be mostly forgotten by history. I think with quite possibly the mild exception of every time a show has bad CGI, it will be like become a thing where it's like, oh look, Jennifer Walters back or something. I don't know. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the She-Hulk TV show, or She-Hulk Attorney at Law. If you agree with this video or disagree, please like, comment, subscribe. If you have any questions, feel free to comment them. Do all that jazz, and I'll see you next time. Yeah. Hey, why don't you hit that sub button? You're gonna become a subscribble. Get to see my content quicker. Wouldn't that be nice? I bet so.